Welcome to Ordo Militaris Radio TV. We are again with Brother Alexis Bonolo in a very special place that most don't know about or forgotten. Welcome, Brother Alexis.
Thank you, AJ. Always glad to be on OMC Radio TV, breaking new grounds in independent Catholic media.
Where are we at?
Here we're at the altar of Saint Alexius in his basilica in Rome, Italy, for his feast day. This is the Basilica Saint Boniface and Saint Alessio on the Aventine Hill, just about a kilometer south of the Vatican.
What is courtship?
Courtship is the process whereby two young people discern and decide to marry one another. It's a traditional series of events and practices that promote prudence and virtue, and in a public way, known to everyone, arrives at an engagement and a marriage.
Why the modern thing called dating is totally different from courtship?
Okay, so in the Catholic teaching, the purpose of marriage is, first of all, the honor and glory of God through the raising up of children. And the secondary reason are the natural reasons that promote a man and woman to be united. The whole purpose of marriage as a public institution of divine foundation, both on the natural and supernatural level, is to build up the fundamental unit of society, the family, which is based on a profound trust and alliance of one man and one woman. This can only take place through a rational decision to marry someone else that is based on rational criteria, that the person is trustworthy, that the person wants to marry you and you want to marry them for the reasons I just stated, and in which emotions and affections are subordinated to these three. The modern concept of dating is based on a notion that the relations between a man who can marry and a woman who could marry exist only on the level of sentiments, emotions, and at the level of pleasure. That it doesn't have to be based on reason, it doesn't have to have the goal of marriage, and it doesn't have to follow moral and natural laws. And it doesn't have to be based on prudence. And most especially, it doesn't have to admit that there exists original sin. So the modern concept of dating presumes that no one is a sinner and no one's inclined to sin, and that everyone is in 100% perfect control of themselves at all times, and that young people have absolute perfect prudence, better than even their parents. It's founded on completely erroneous notions of the French Revolution or the French Enlightenment that held that there's nothing wrong with humanity. Humans don't need to be saved. We don't need grace. And that our natural instincts are good enough themselves and are not corrupted in any way.
In reading up about courtship, the Wikipedia article mentioned betrothing. I was like, pretty good one. What happened to being betrothed, and why was it replaced with engagement?
Okay, so betrothals do exist still in some nations. An engagement is a public-private act in which a couple announce their intentions to marry. With the degeneration of morals in some countries like the United States, engagements are replacing marriages. So after living some years together, they announce they're engaged and they think that's a marriage. But a betrothal was actually a legal act whereby the promise was so firm that if you didn't go through the marriage, you suffered legal and financial consequences. And a betrothal seems old-fashioned, but it actually is an expression of true love and trust. Because a couple should not get married if they don't have absolute trust in one another, and if they're not capable of that trust. And so consequently, the contract of betrothal incorporated all those things, required the couple to take counsel with their elders and their betters, and arrange a matter in such a way that it would produce a good marriage. Also because betrothal acts also included sometimes prenuptial arrangements and things like that. Obviously, they were more common among the nobility who had the ability to organize than they were among the poor, who might just get married on the spur of the moment.
So, yeah, let's see. Apologies, folks. It's early here and lunchtime over there, and I'm still trying to. Okay, what takes place in true Christian courtship when they begin the process? What activities are they do?
Okay, first of all, before we begin the actual process of courtship, let's talk about the individual young person. Yeah. A young person needs to be prepared for courtship. That is, he must be capable of marrying, or she must be capable of marrying, must want to get married, not just date. He must want, or she must want to have children, because that's the purpose of the family. They must know that this is a divine institution and that it will bind them for life, and that it's based on trust. Okay, first of all, because people misunderstand the word love with affection, but also I'll say trust, an absolute trust in the other person. So if you're a man and you're going to be head of a household by marrying a woman, what's your first preparation? You should be in a state of grace. Okay, you need to be confirmed already. You should have a job and you should have some savings, because how are you going to support your first child? Children are born if you're not yet ready for it. If you're not yet prepared, you should not begin courting, okay? Because human nature, being what it is, once love is enkindled, you should really get married within 3 months. You shouldn't have a courtship that lasts longer than 3 months. And that's Saint Alphonsus Liguori, doctor of the church on Catholic morality. So first prepare yourself, and you should know how to comport yourself with dignity, with honor. You should have kept your life's record clean, or you should clean it up. You should know how to present yourself, dress well, and you should have the means to do that, okay? So that's the preparation. So now this is the courtship. Courtship also presupposes, obviously, you've gotten to know the other person, and you feel inspired or attracted, and you have a strong desire to consider marriage with them and begin a process of that discernment. So you've already known them in the workplace or in social life. You may have been to dinners together with friends, but you've never been out by yourselves, as it were. Now, Catholic courtship holds that you should never go out by yourself. You should always have an adult there as a chaperone. Because as I said, the purpose of marriage is a rational, adult, determined, resolute decision to marry someone for life who's worthy of your trust, and to found a family with them for the honor and glory of God and the raising up of a new generation. To a certain extent, a certain amount of natural consolations involved, but that shouldn't be your primary goal, okay? So how does courtship begin? You should begin by asking, obviously, if the woman or the other feels similarly, okay? And once you feel similarly that you might both want to marry, you should ask if you're a man, you should ask her father for permission to court her. And if you're a woman, you should not take the initiative, okay? And the reason for this, why a woman should never take the initiative is, you need a man who's going to protect you and run the household. And if you have to take the initiative in marriage, you're not going to find a man like that, okay? Likewise, if you're a man, you should not let the woman take initiative, because the man should govern the house, not the woman. All kinds of problems break out with that. And if you're letting a woman take the initiative, it's not only imprudent, but you'll end up in a lot of problems. And it's certainly not, it's certainly unworthy of the dignity of man to do that. So once the father grants permission, he should establish, if he's a good Catholic, the times and the places and the chaperone. Why does he establish it? Because it's the woman most likely that needs protection. So a grandmother, an aunt, some well-to-do, virtuous woman of the lady's family should be chaperoned, and it should be at a godly hour of the day or night, usually at a meal, okay, or maybe a promenade along the river, or a nice part of town that's honest, or going to some kind of public entertainment that is of good morals, okay. I don't recommend movies, because the purpose of courtship is to talk to one another. In a movie, you're not talking to one another. I don't recommend sports games where there's lots of cheering, because you can't hear one another and you're there mostly to enjoy yourself, okay? So, and during this time, the chaperone remains at a slight distance. For example, at the adjacent table in the restaurant, 5 or 6 feet away behind you, if you're walking on a promenade, and the chaperone decides when the courtship ends, okay? And that's the basic procedure. And the purpose of all this is to talk things out in an objective way. So she's going to ask, do you have a job? And you tell her what job you have. She's going to ask, have you saved up money for marriage? And you should tell her exactly how much money you saved up. She might ask you what property you own, and you should tell her that. And then likewise, at the proper time, you can ask her or her chaperone those similar questions. I personally hold that you should ask the chaperone the questions about money, finance, and things like that, because in some cases, the family will provide something for the woman as a dowry. She should ask, what do you want to do in life? What is your future? What are your goals and values? And these things she should have the chaperone within earshot, so the chaperone is also a testimony of it. So after several occasions of courtship, and it shouldn't be, I don't think it should be more like 7 times, you know, Saint Alfonso says within 3 months, it shouldn't go longer than 3 months. And it doesn't have to be on a daily basis. It could be every other week and stuff. She and you exchange the important information of life and clarify anything. And you both should have, if you have any doubts in private, maybe with a private investigator, you answer your doubts. You don't ask the other, you don't doubt the other person, okay? So if she says she works for some company, you don't say, how do I know that? You should already trust her much. But if you should have some doubt, hire a private investigator and say, does she work at this place? And she should do the same. You should both agree to do that. Even credit ratings. It's important to know how much debt you are in. You should not be in debt. You should not have $50,000 on your credit card going into marriage. That will ruin the marriage. And if anything is lacking in the suitability of one or the other, the woman has the right to say, I don't think you're ready yet, and this is the reason why. And the man shouldn't get crushed by that. He should make himself ready, because if he really wants her, he'll make himself ready. Whereas if the woman is inadequate, in my opinion, he should not tell her that. Okay. He should say something to the chaperone or to the father if the father inquires. Okay. If she doesn't meet up to the requirements, he shouldn't continue the courtship, and then the father or the chaperone should contact him and ask what the reasons. And he might say, well, she has $50,000 debt on a credit card. If that was paid off, that needs to be paid off before I would consider courtship with her, And no matter how strong you feel physically for a person, these are decisions you should use. And this doesn't mean it's cold and calculating. This is because if you truly love a person and you're planning to marry them, you want that marriage to succeed and prosper for your whole lives. So you want it to begin on the right step. And it should be based on trust, respect, and these principles that will guarantee a sound marriage. Obviously, the other person shouldn't have been previously married. And I do not recommend that you marry someone who's had a marriage annulled. I do not recommend that. I do not recommend that you marry an ex-priest or an ex-monk, okay? I'm not saying these people can't marry and sometimes have successful marriages. I'm just saying I don't recommend it, okay? If you're a virgin and clean slate, you should marry someone who's a virgin and clean slate. On that question, it is not proper for the man to ask the woman if she's a virgin. That is totally improper. He could ask the father or the chaperone in private on a different occasion. Okay. But if you're not sure of that from the way she comports herself, then you might want to just end the courtship, because a person who is a virgin doesn't have their mind fixed on what. They dress in a modest way, and they don't try to control people with that, with their looks or with desire. So an honest person is trustworthy in themselves. Sometimes they might have a complicated history, and you can ask questions about that. But it's always best for the man to ask the chaperone or the father in private questions about complex history, like, why was she working at 3 different companies in the same year? You don't want her to have to say to you how she was abused by her employer or mistreated. That's just not proper during a courtship. So there's a certain diplomacy that is based on respect and love that should rule during the period in which young people are discerning to get married. And that's very important for building trust and respect, because the first rule of respect is not to doubt the other. Okay. And the second rule is not to accuse them to their face of anything. Okay. And there are ways in courtship where the young man and the young man, can ask family members about the person or seek information through other ways.
Let's see. On the major errors during these modern days, the huge problem still of cohabitation, all that.
Okay, so we're doing this program today in the Basilica of Saint Alexius because he chose to follow God during his marriage ceremony. His parents had arranged a marriage with him, and he didn't want to marry. He wanted to be a monk. But since he was their only son and heir, they wanted children, and so they wanted him to marry. That was an age when marriages were arranged by parents, and sometimes the parents didn't make decisions according to what the person was capable of. A long ago age. Now we're on the opposite end of extremes, where people think that prior to marriage, you should kiss a girl, touch a girl, and do even other things, which is totally against Catholic morals. The purpose, for example, why in a wedding ceremony, the man takes the woman's hand or kisses her after the wedding thing is because that's supposed to be the first time they touch. They should not touch, okay? Because God has made the bodies of man and woman in such a way that touching is for generation of children. They should never be alone. They should not drink alcoholic beverages together. They certainly shouldn't get into a bedroom together. And they should always dress very properly. A man should not touch a girl. And there's all this thing about putting your arm around her and kissing and hugging her during dating. That's totally wrong. A woman belongs to herself or to her husband. It doesn't belong to her boyfriend. And these are profound errors, because what happens is, if you violate these rules, then their minds become confused by lust. And then they're not making the proper decisions that will lead to a marriage that will last for a lifetime. They're just trying to satisfy their lust, which very quickly overwhelms reason. And this is one reason why before you court, you should practice chastity, because you need a clear mind. All the people end up with annulments and divorces. They didn't have a clear mind. They made the wrong decision. They jumped into it, and those are some of the errors, and that's why they need to be avoided.
Now, you mentioned the pre-arranged marriages in those days, and especially for the nobles and heir apparents, the two different thrones of Europe. Now, how should it be done today to find, a holy wife, a holy mother, but also queen for the entire country?
Prearranged marriages, in the sense of the parents assist in the arrangement of the marriages, is a really good institution. When it was done, there was almost no divorce, okay? And it was like zero annulments. And why? Because parents have more prudence, they have experience in life, and they've lived longer in town than the young people. So they know the other families, they know their reputations, and they know many things of which no one would ever speak. So ideally, what should be happening in a Catholic family when a young man or a young woman is getting to the age of 17 is that the father should take the initiative of talking to other fathers in the parish who have similarly aged children and say, pretty soon my son or daughter is going to be thinking of marriage. Do you want to sit down and talk? And maybe one of our children might be suitable for one of your children. Okay, because the father knows to select a good, honest family that's well off, that's, good reputation in all matters. And that might seem entirely contrary to the modern concept of love, but actually it's the best thing, because I said that the affection is not love. Love is the virtue that governs, that uses reason and intellect and prudence to make the right decision that will prosper in the future. Because if you really love the other person, you want a prosperous, faithful, long-lasting marriage. If you only want to exploit them, then you don't want those things. You want at least some aspect, okay? And that denigrates the person. So the fathers as heads of the family, they have this natural instinct to want to protect their son or daughter and to get them well married. And so they're the ones that usually have the most prudence in this thing. They can regard advice from other holy persons, so women or men in town, or even the clergyman, if the clergyman is of good morals. If he's not of good morals, certainly do not ask anyone of bad morals. And don't ask unbelievers. And fathers should seek a wedding for their son or daughter with another faithful Catholic, not with a non-Catholic. Because the basic causes of divorce are arguments over money, arguments over religion, and arguments over politics. So choose someone who is of the same thing as your son or daughter. And it's a very good institution, and it will guarantee a long marriage. And if you are a prudent young person, you will ask your father's counsel in this. And maybe if you have a little shyness in asking the girl to court you, asking your father to speak to her father is the easiest way to get it going. Okay, and it's not shameful. That's the proper thing to do.
Yes, something you wanted to touch on: the awful modern marriage preparation classes.
Yeah. So in many parts of the world, you're required to take a year-long course for marriage preparation. This is totally contrary to Catholic doctrine. Okay. Why is it contrary to Catholic doctrine? Because no two young people could date for a whole year or go through courtship for a whole year and not commit mortal sin. Saint Alphonsus says it's impossible after 3 months to avoid mortal sin. Okay. So to have a year basically guarantees that they'll be entering marriage in mortal sin, and that their marriage, therefore, they will not receive the grace of the sacrament, and their marriage will fall apart. And that's what's happening. The marriages are falling apart. The second thing is that marriage preparation includes things that should never be taught, like sex education. It is not necessary to teach these things. Nature themselves teaches them, and the couple can read up on that after they're married, okay, when they want to have it. But it's also a lot of pop psychology and false doctrines all mixed in. And it's usually full of a lot of feminism, how the man should, be not the equal, but the subservient of the woman, and all kinds of crazy things. Like the man should go through birthing with his wife and, sit there and hold her while she's going, go through the exercises out of birth. That's totally absurd. A man should have nothing to do with that. And if his wife needs help in labor, you call a midwife. Okay. Also because it's based on a false notion of the family, that the two are equal. That's not true. It is true that the human dignity of a woman and the human dignity of man are equal as humans. That's true. And they were all equally the adopted sons of Jesus Christ, of God in baptism. But it is not true in a family that the wife is equal to the husband. The husband is the head of the house. That's the teaching of Scripture. If you don't believe that, you're a heretic. You're not even a Christian. Okay. And if the person you're marrying doesn't believe that, don't marry them because they're not a Christian. Okay. And but there's all other kind of errors, like usually these courses are taught by the most unprepared people who don't know anything about morals. So someone will ask the priest or the person running the course a question, and that answer will be erroneous and destroy every marriage in that room. So I highly recommend you get married where the priest doesn't require marriage prep, but that the priest makes certain that each of them know their catechism well and speaks to each of them in private. Marriage prep shouldn't be done together. It should be in private. The rest of the things, if they need to talk, occurring courtship, that's when they start asking their questions and things like that.
Yeah. Do you know who created that mess?
I can guess it's Marxists in the church, modernists afterwards, after the council, who wanted to destroy marriage. Because the best marriage preparation is the grace of God, a good confession, a prudent and honest life, an upright courtship, respect for the other person, trust in the other person, and finding a person who's worthy. All the other mumbo jumbo psychology, sociology, that's not going to save or make your marriage, because that has no power. It comes out of minds that are in total darkness and don't know that it's the sacrament that gives you the grace. And God, who is the cause of marriage, the creator of marriage, and to whom marriage is ordered for the honor and glory of God.
Do we know what was used in the medieval days when it was pretty much fully Catholic? How they did the priest, meet with the two getting married, and it's like, how did they, prepare?
So, well, the pastor of the parish would be the one hearing everyone's confession, so he would be able to advise the young people from what they were confessing, whether they had a vocation to marriage, whether they should marry or not. I shouldn't use the word vocation, because you don't have a vocation to marriage. You have a duty to marriage, in the sense of, if you want to have children, or to be with another woman, or if you're a woman, you want to be with a man who's able to marry, then your duty is to marry. It's not a choice, it's a duty. It's not a vocation. It's not like God gives you the grace to marry that girl. That does not happen, okay? God might arrange a marriage, and marriages are arranged in heaven in the sense of God's providence ordains from beginning that two should meet. But God doesn't give grace that you should marry someone else. That's, okay. It has to be a free will decision coming from your life of virtue, your heart, and your soul in regard to the other person. So you should speak to your confessor, and the priest in the parish should know good families. And if he's not the confessor, but the pastor of the parish, you're more able to ask him, because you don't want to ask the priest questions which he cannot answer on the basis because he hears people's confession. You're going through courtship in the traditional way. Your parents began it, your fathers began it, and they're talking to prudent, honest, and upright people in the town that know everyone, and so make a good decision. or at least in the adjacent town. No good decision. And that's how it's avoided, because when you have experts doing something, you don't have error. Whereas young people are not expert in anything, and that's why they make so many errors in these things.
If you want, speak about the modern horde marriage ceremony compared to what is traditionally done back in the good old days of the church.
So the marriage rite in the traditional liturgy of the Roman rite is an absolutely beautiful ceremony where the hands of one another are bound together, and it's very elegant. Marriage, the wedding ceremony, should be Catholic, elegant, solemn, because the promise made for life between two people to be in marriage is a wonderful act of virtue, okay? It is the consummate act of virtue for the layman who doesn't have a vocation, and it's going to be the foundation of his whole life and the life of his wife and his children. So for all these reasons, it deserves to be publicly celebrated with honor, splendor, and solemnity. And so there was a particular vow that you didn't write your own vows. Everything was done in a particular way. And I highly recommend getting married in the traditional Roman rite, if you're of the Roman rite. And if you are of the other Eastern rites, get married in the traditional marriage rite. Do not follow these Novus Ordo or Aggiornamento or Vatican II rituals, where you write your own vows. Nearly all those marriages are invalid because those vows are invalid. A vow to be valid has to have certain precise canonical elements. And how could you have lay people who have never studied canon law start writing your own vows? That is a modernist trick by sick, perverted clergy. Okay. And so these ceremonies are full of these modern ceremonies are full of all kinds of emotion, rock and roll music.
Oh dear.
People are dressed in a bordello or a marriage, one of these marriage factory chapels you see at Las Vegas. It's totally inappropriate.
Oh, I've been to too many, seen too much. Oh, just to say the bridesmaids look drunk almost every time. You hear me? I think we lost him. Oh, let's see here, folks. Having a little problem here. Brother Alexis, you there? There you are.
Okay, there you go.
Your video.
Sorry. Okay, hopefully we didn't lose the line.
No, pretty good. All right, that's it. Now it's time for a walk around if you can.
Yeah, okay. So, attach the camera and go on a tour. So this is the center of the basilica. This basilica has been here. This church has been here since like the 6th century, 4th century, one of the earliest basilicas. And it was rebuilt under Innocent III in the beginning of the 13th century, and then rebuilt in the 17th century in the growth. So let me get out of the light. So there you go. You can see some of this ceiling. And you can see the pavements, some still in the medieval style here. So as you notice all these blue chairs, this church is famous for weddings, which is unusual why we're here. The wealthy, the upper class here at Rome, arrange to get married in this church, and you have to book like a year and a half in advance. It's such big demand. And it's a beautiful place to get married. church is dominantly colored in pink, and I guess that's why the ladies like it. And it's permanently set up to get married. So you can see there's the kneelers for the witnesses. Here's the kneelers for the couple.
Mm-hmm.
Turn it down. The couple. There's the high altar, and that altar is found the relics of Saint Boniface the martyr and Saint Alexius the confessor. There's the high altar. Come over here, and on the side of the church, there are beautiful mortuary monuments of famous noblemen, Roman nobles. There's one of a noble lady, and she built this, and her remains are buried there to ask people to pray for her. And you can see another nobleman there at the very end. We'll go visit our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. I'll show you the ancient Greek icon of Our Lady of Saint Alexius. It's called that because the Greeks brought this icon from the East when they were given this monastery around the year 1000. Here is the chapel. And there is the icon. I can't get very close to it. And with this app, I cannot, oh, maybe I can. Okay. The icon of Our Lady of Saint Alexius. I can expand it. Yeah, I can expand it. Okay. Maybe a bit better. See that? Yeah. Beautiful icon. There's the tabernacle altar. Zoom out again. And here you can see we're in the sanctuary now. So here's the Holy Spirit coming down, and there's the high altar. This baldacchino above the high altar was to protect the priest from having bird droppings fall on him during the Middle Ages, because birds would come into the churches. Their doors and windows were open most of the year. And that's why those monumental things. You see there's an organ. You see the organ pipes up there. And we'll show you the choir for the canons of this basilica, where the clergy would say the divine office. This was installed after the 17th century. This is the Western style. And if you notice here, this seat here is for the Pope, because every basilica has a chair for the Pope, and this is where the Pope will sit during the divine office or divine liturgy. And these pillars are ancient, in the ancient medieval style of the 13th century, so they're probably original. And here's the fine woodwork of the choir. The word choir is where monks or canons would recite the divine office. We now use it in English for a group of people who sing. That is not what the word originally meant. And Catholics before the Napoleonic period were buried in churches. So here we have the tomb of looks like a prelate of some importance. His name is Erasmus Alexander. Oh, he was a bishop. So here's the tomb of a Catholic bishop. It was Napoleon who ordered that everyone be buried outside of town because he wanted to separate the burial of individuals from the Catholic religion so that unbelievers and believers could be buried together. It was a denial of the resurrection of the just. And Catholics shouldn't accept that. They should go back to being buried in their churches, but the eras of the French Revolution. So this church is now in the care of the Samaski Fathers. Their founder, excuse me, I don't know the name of the founder, but he had a vision of Our Lady. Said, take care of all these little poor orphan children. And so that's what he did. And over here, above on the far wall, a little remnant of the presence of the Greek monks here. It says, Agia Triada, Holy Trinity in Greek. Okay, I'm still with you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one of the confessionals. Okay, the wood confessionals, what I used to have. And we go back now to the tomb of Saint. There's a beautiful painting here of Saint Jerome. I'll show you. Saint Jerome is considered one of the first cardinals of the Roman Church. So he's depicted there as a hermit with the cardinal's hat. Oop. It's in reverse there, right there on my big finger. Yeah, and
Sun has a glare.
Saint Jerome.
There you go.
Saint Jerome. And there's a beautiful painting here of Christ on the cross. I'll show you that. It's on the other side of the church. This is really amazing that we can do this program from Rome with you in Kansas and me here. Here's a beautiful painting of Christ crucified. Let me try to get close to it.
Wow.
I can't do it just because I can't get so close to it with this camera. Magnificent and solemn. So that's the Basilica of Saint Boniface and Saint Alexius in Rome, and a church dedicated to marriage for a saint who decided not to get married right during his marriage ceremony. And I'll tell you a little bit about Saint Alexius while we finish, or are you going to ask me some questions?
Yeah, talk about Saint Alexius.
Okay, so we'll go to his altar. He was a son of a Roman patron. He was heir to the family. They were a patrician class family, so they had been consuls and high Roman nobility. This is in the late Empire, and they had arranged his marriage to a girl of a very wealthy family. But he had a calling from God to be a hermit and not marry. And he got up the courage to say no right before the taking of the vows. So he left her at the altar, as it were. And he got on the next ship out of Rome for Syria. And he went to Syria and he lived like a beggar hermit for the rest of his life. And he was such a holy man that one day the people in the church in, I think it was Damascus, heard an icon of Our Lady speaking and saying, "Behold the man of God." So at that caused Christ a stir, and everyone started thinking he was a saint, and he didn't want that. So he fled back to Rome. And when he came to Rome, he decided, as an act of extreme and heroic humility, to return to his father's house without identifying himself. So this was like 20 years later. He had a barb. He looked totally different. He never told anyone who he was. So he begged at his father's house, and eventually he was allowed to sleep under a stairway. And there's the wooden stairway here in the reliquary you can see above his altar, right there. And he was mistreated by the butler of the household, and he would hear at nighttime his father lamenting that he had lost his own son. And you'd hear his wife, who lived with the family because they had been engaged, and therefore his family was obliged to take care of her, lamenting that she never got to be married. And he endured that all quietly and never told anyone who he was. Until one day he died. And when his father was taking the body to be buried, they heard a voice in church identify him, who he was. And they found on his person a document showing that he was, in fact, the son of the nobleman. And it said that on the grounds of his father's house, this basilica has been built. And that's the story of Saint Alexius. So the Greek monks are very devoted to him. He's a great saint for all religious. No matter how strong you feel for a girl, if you're called by God, leave everything, even in the midst of a wedding ceremony, and go and follow Jesus Christ. So he's a great saint, and he's always been a great inspiration for me. And he has this association with the Order of St. Francis, because it was on the vigil of St. Alexius' feast, while this church was being rebuilt in the beginning of the 13th century, that St. Francis met the Pope. And it was that night the Pope had a dream of a poor man holding up the Lateran Basilica and preventing it from crumbling. He probably thought it was St. Alexius, because he was going to celebrate High Mass here the next day. But when St. Francis came to meet him a second time, he recognized, no, it was St. Francis of Assisi, and he gave him permission to found his order. It was a year after that, or 2 or 3 years after that, that this church was rebuilt and consecrated by Innocent III over time. So, Saint Alexius, great saint. And for all those who are named Alexis, Alessia, Alessio, he's not the patron of those named Alexander. Those are different things.
So that's the real staircase?
That's the real, that is the reliquary of the staircase that's been kept down through the ages. You can see how it's made so crudely. It looks to me like a staircase going down into a wine cellar, which means he probably was sleeping in the wine cellar in a damp, cold spot. And
yeah. Wow. And what's in the bust?
that is a metal statue made of just sheet metal. And I think this one is probably made of bronze. And it's in the shape of Saint Alexius. He's wearing the 2 seashells showing he lived as a pilgrim. And in it will be a relic of the saint, one of his bones, stored at the very center of it. So during a procession, they'll carry this bust. And so you not only can see the saint, but his relics are being carried in your presence. And it's not here all the time. It's only here on his feast day on the high altar, okay? Because I come here frequently and you don't see him there. So, and that's why they have the candles burning today. They're in honor of the relic, because on the feast day of a saint, his relics receive 4 lit candles. So the clergy running this know their rubrics of the traditional Roman Rite rubrics. Thanks be to God. And you can come and, if you come and visit, you can light a candle here to the saint and make your prayers. I think young people come here and pray for good and holy. The vocation should come here and pray for the courage to follow the Lord and leave everything behind.
Yeah. Is there a painting with that staircase?
There is a white statue. I don't think I can get in there. There is a marble statue of the saint. Let me see if I can get my, right there, of him lying down. And then there's like above it, you see the cherubim descending on the saint, because it depicts the saint in his hours of death. So the cherubim are descending to receive his soul and bring it to God. And there's a burst of raised light coming down, showing that heavens are opening to him.
Kind of reminds me of the staircase in New Mexico.
Yes.
Something you don't see built like that anymore.
Now, Catholic churches should be beautiful, and their side altars should really teach the lesson of the saint. So they've been very creative here in what they've done. I'd like to stay longer with you, AJ, but I'm getting repeated phone calls from some individuals, which I have to answer.
Okay. All right, this is Ordo Militaris Radio signing off, saying Deus Volt.
Deus Volt from the Basilica of St. Bonaventure and St. Alexis.